1MDB has sparked embezzlement and money laundering investigations across
one of the
at least 10
biggest corruption
countries.
scandals the world has ever seen.
What may be the biggest financial scam in history.
A number of corrupt 1MDB officials treated this public trust as a personal bank account.
Follow us as we bring you into the courtroom where the biggest financial scandal in Malaysian history is being heard. By the Malaysian Insight, this is the Najib Razak 1MDB trial, and I'm Patrick Teoh. Remember how 1MDB had agreed to pump in even more money just 1 year into the 1MDB Petro-Saudi joint venture, even though things were shaky from the start? Well, Shahrol Halmi, who was the CEO of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, said he felt uncomfortable with this second loan in July 2010. But when he voiced his concerns, Najib's endorsement trumped everything, and the loan went through. Shahrol had described how 1MDB was structured to give Najib ultimate power, and Najib used this power to push through deals and negotiations despite objections. On day 13 of his 1MDB trial, Najib Razak watched from the accused dock as the court zeroed in on the former Prime Minister's role in the joint venture called 1MDB Petro-Saudi Limited. If you were uncomfortable with the second loan, then why did it go through? This was the question prosecutor Gopal Sriram posed to Shahrol. It was out of his hands, Shahrol said. He had asked Joe to tell Najib to put a stop to it or at least lower the amount. But without his knowledge, Tariq Obaid and Prince Turki wrote letters to Najib requesting for an additional $750 million. And in March 2011, Najib passed the letters along to the then 1MDB chairman, Lodin Wok Kamarudin. Enclosed was a note from the former PM stating that he had no opposition to the additional investment. Shahrol pushed back some more, and eventually the loan was reduced to $330 million. But due to the lack of funds, in May 2010, 1MDB could only pay out $205 million. According to Shahrol, the money was to be used to purchase the Maythorn Hotel Group based in London. But the sale ultimately did not go through. Petro-Saudi was not happy with the reduced amount, and they complained to King Abdullah. Or, in Jolo's words, Prince Turki had complained to Daddy, Shahrol told the court. Following this, the witness said he was made to understand that a discussion between Najib and King Abdullah took place. In October 2010, Shahrol had no choice but to release the remaining $125 million. By this time, 1MDB had invested $1.83 billion in the joint venture with Petro-Saudi. That's the initial $1 billion, a later $500 million, and the $330 million we just talked about. Shahrol said that Lodin called for a series of meetings with Petro-Saudi to bring the money back to Malaysia. The meetings, 3 in total, were held in May 2011 in London. Najib attended one of them. In the meeting that Najib attended, Tariq gifted the former PM with a watch. It looked expensive, the witness said. Shahrol added that no minutes were taken at that meeting. Like the other two, the purpose of that meeting was to return the money loaned to Petro-Saudi to Malaysia. But this was not discussed at all, Shahrol said. Instead, they talked about the potential investments Petro-Saudi could make in Malaysia. And just 4 days after the meetings were concluded, Shahrol said money started flowing out of 1MDB again. But Shahrol said the meetings also had a somewhat fruitful outcome. It was decided that the $1.83 billion would be used to acquire a 49% stake in yet another Petro-Saudi subsidiary, namely Petro-Saudi Oil Services Limited. The shares would in turn be sold to a Hong Kong-based firm called Bridge Partners International Investments Fund for cash. The witness said this brought comfort as it meant the 1MDB funds in Petro-Saudi would be brought home. He described this as an, quote, elegant solution that would benefit 1MDB, Petro-Saudi, and the governments of Malaysia and Saudi Arabia, unquote. Joe Low, it seemed, had tried hard to control the narrative. Remember how he had given Amhari Nazaruddin and the late Azlin Alias talking points in a bid to quell suspicions over 1MDB? Well, he did the same with Shahrol for PetroSaudi. Shahrol said the talking points included PetroSaudi's background and history, as well as its affiliation with King Abdullah. The objective was to ward off suspicions in case the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee, the Auditor General, or any other government parties asked about 1MDB. The talking points were to show that PetroSaudi was trustworthy and had a good reputation. Joe told Shahrol that Najib had approved the talking points, and the witness knew that Joe was telling the truth because Najib himself had instructed him to act within the scope of the points. And then Joe told Shahrol to destroy all documents that could be linked to the talking points. They could be detrimental to Najib's political career if fallen into the wrong hands, Joe had said. On Najib's part, Shahrol said the former PM had never made any public statements defending 1MDB. In late 2012, Joe asked Shahrol if he wanted to move on to a government agency called Pemandu. Pemandu was formed in 2009 to drive economic transformation. It ought to be pointed out here, again, that Joe Low never held any official position in the government nor in 1MDB. Shahrol had told Joe that he serves the Prime Minister and would only go if Najib wanted him to go. The witness said he felt that there were so many things yet to do in 1MDB, such as development of the Tun Razak exchange, Bandar Malaysia, as well as improving the independent power producers industry. He said he was surprised when a few months later, Lodin told him that 1MDB's board had already been informed that Shahrol was moving on to Pemandu. He got the offer letter from Pemandu shortly after. Shahrol stepped down as 1MDB's CEO in March 2013, but he remained on its board till 2017. After lunch, Sriram asked Shahrol if he had heard of Red Granite Pictures. The witness said he has. Red Granite was the company that produced the Hollywood film Wolf of Wall Street. That's right, the one that starred Leonardo DiCaprio. Now, just a side note, when the U.S. Department of Justice started investigating allegations that the Wolf of Wall Street was financed by Red Granite using 1MDB money, DiCaprio quickly returned the money and gifts given to him by Red Granite representatives, including an Oscar trophy won by Marlon Brando in 1954 for the black and white film On the Waterfront. Joe had bought the Oscar for $600,000 at an auction and given it to DiCaprio as a gift. Sriram showed Shahrol a document dated September 10, 2012, which showed that Red Granite received $9 million from Goodstar Limited via RBS Courts in Scotland. Goodstar, as we now know, belonged to Joe Low. There was only one name registered as owner of Red Granite: Najib's stepson, Riza Aziz. Shahrol said that in November 2009, Joe asked him to accompany Najib on a trip to New York. Joe himself and Lodin also went along. On November 22, 2009, a meeting took place between Goldman Sachs Group CEO Lloyd Blankfein, Goldman Sachs Asia CEO Tim Leissner, Najib and Joe Low. Shahrol and Lodin were also at the meeting. Tim and Joe were playing matchmakers, Shahrol said, getting Najib and Lloyd to meet. Based on their body language, it seemed as though Tim and Joe were good friends, the witness testified. Shahrol said that 1MDB's current and potential investments in real estate, energy, tourism and agriculture were discussed at the meeting. Najib had asked Lloyd for Goldman Sachs' support in these ventures based on the bank's expertise. The witness said that the meeting left him feeling confident in any monetary dealings with Goldman Sachs. This, it seemed, was also how Najib felt, because after that meeting, the former Prime Minister would give his blessings whenever Joe wanted to bring in Goldman Sachs to weigh in on any of 1MDB's negotiations. Goldman Sachs, of course, made a killing of its involvement in 1MDB. For its work in advising 1MDB on 3 bond offerings in 2012 and 2013, it earned a hefty $600 million in fees. Malaysian authorities have since charged 17 former and current Goldman Sachs directors for misleading investors, while the US has indicted Tim Leisner and another former Goldman banker, Roger Ng, who worked in Singapore, for conspiring to loot the fund. Two years after the trip to New York, Shahrol was invited by Mubadala to watch the Formula One races in Abu Dhabi. During a gala at the event, Joe had arranged for the witness to sit next to Mubadala's CEO, Philip K. Haddad, and Philip had whispered to Shahrol that Malaysian business tycoon Ananda Krishnan wanted to sell his stake in the energy producer Tanjong Energy Holdings Sdn Bhd. Shahrol said he saw it as a great opportunity to grow the independent power producers industry and sought Najib's approval to go ahead with it. Both Najib and Joe said it was a good idea, and Goldman was brought in as a consultant. Through this deal, 1MDB bought 2 gas-fired power plants. Shahrol said that Joe told him Najib had received a backing for the deal in the form of a guarantee from the International Petroleum Investment Company, or IPIC. According to Joe, Najib got the guarantee by personally calling the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. 1MDB bought Tanjong Energy on March 2, 2012 for 10.6 billion ringgit. Goldman Sachs earned 100 million ringgit from the deal. With that, court was adjourned and will resume Monday with Shahrol back on the stand. This podcast was brought to you by the Malaysian Insight. The team behind the Najib Razak 1MDB podcast are Revati Supramaniam, Yapik Kwan, Yvonne Lim, and Ravin Palanisamy. Timothy Acharyam and Beat Hong provided additional reporting. And I'm Patrick Teo.